Oh my
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So this morning, as I mentioned in the email yesterday, we have a guest speaker, one of our former students, Andrew Wemmick. Andrew, I guess graduated from the program probably, what, 2011?
2011, 2010?
And has been serving on our MSRED advisory board for several years now. Andrew was with CREC, now he is with Highland Real Estate Capital, a new company that I guess was started a couple of years ago with one of his business partners. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Andrew's going to walk through, I think, a couple of deals, or at least one deal, and open up for questions after that.
Awesome. Good morning. Andrew Remick. I graduated here, like Dr. Corby said, in 2011. 2011, I was going to school full-time here and ended up starting at Continental Real Estate Company. There I started as a associate, really fulfilling two roles, helping the brokerage side and helping the acquisition side. Over the next, call it 3 to 4 years, slowly gravitated to the acquisition side, focusing on office and retail. And then over the next few years after that, one of the partners left, so I ended up filling in his shoes. And for the last 3 years, I've run all of the acquisitions and asset management at CREC. If you've followed the real estate sort of world, CREC was acquired by Colliers in November of last year. So it was my time to either keep on running but on a new platform or try and jump ship. And so I ended up moving over to Highline Real Estate Capital. Highline Real Estate Capital was founded by my former, well, my partner now, but my former partner about 3 years ago. We focus on acquiring office and retail, primarily somewhere in the range of $15 to $30 million. We have equity to do deals that are larger than that, but we sort of see this pocket that's, I guess, most valuable to us in that 15 to call it $30 million range. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through one of the deals that I previously did at CREC. I'll go through the underwriting, the asset management, and then do the this position and show you guys sort of A to Z what happened. Just curious, is this class a newer class or?
It's mostly folks that have been here for a couple semesters.
Okay. So let me pull up the match real quick. Are you guys familiar with Coral Springs? No. So, I was born and raised in this area, so it was kind of hit home for me, so it was nice to work on a project that was close to home. I guess what's the best way? So I guess all 30,000 feet northwest quadrant of Broward County. The main retail in Coral Springs is along here on University Drive. This was a deal that we ended up picking up off market. we knew the market was probably somewhere between 90–95% leased, but this one center was about 50. We didn't know why. Was it a combination of retailers didn't want to be here? Was it landlord? Once we dug in, we realized, hey, the landlord wasn't paying commissions, wasn't paying TI, so they basically wanted the tenants to come in, build out their space, and take that risk. So we ended up going to, so I correct, it's really two-sided. Our bread and butter is management and leasing. So because of that, we have relationships and we rep Target and Total Wine and Bye Bye Baby and Kohl's and Sports Authority at the time and a million-dollar retailer. So we went out to our relationships and said, hey, would you guys want to be here? So before even acquiring on the property, we were able to get Total Wine. So we were able to get Total Wine here. So having them in our back pocket allowed us to pay the maximum price that the owner wanted. Zoom in. So I guess I'll just dig into the market in that one. One of the things we like to do and present to retailers is say, hey, what other shopping centers are in this market? What boxes are here? Who's here and who's not here? So we would always do a void analysis, and because of that, we knew Publix was here, LA Fitness was here, Marshalls, Fresh Market. So we said, who's not here? We knew Total Wine, Trader Joe's, maybe a Lucky's, and maybe a few other people. So with that, we ended up going, digging even more down. And doing just university. Who's around here as far as out parcels, local tenants, and then we knew that, so then we pulled up, well, what are the rents? So Coral Springs is really made up of 3 or 4 corridors. You have your main corridor, which is University. You have another corridor which is closer to the mall, which is just south of there. You have the 441 corridor, which is just west of there, and then you have the I say the northern part of Coral Springs, which is sort of by Parkland. See it. Can you guys see that? Mm-hmm. The rents? So if you look at this, rents all along that University retail strip is somewhere between $28 and $40 a foot. So we have the Walk, a new retail development, which is now a Chase Bank and a Payway. We have a property across the street and another Publix anchored center, and they're all ranging somewhere between $25 and $40. And then we also want to know what sort of the high mark and what's the low mark of the market. We realized that the low mark was probably around, call it $15–20. And then one of the things to note in this is we also have to look at the all-in dollar of the gross amount. So tenants are paying the rent plus the CAM, so their whole total dollars between $43, $39 a foot. So if we know our CAM is $10, we could probably afford to rent that, call it $30. So we ended up doing that. And then the next piece was, all right, so we know where the rents are, but what are center like this trading for once they're fully leased?
How do you get all that information? Where are you pulling that from?
We usually pull it from CoStar. CoStar, calling brokers, LoopNet. But I think one of the main things was that, so our portfolio of management and leasing was about 13 million feet. So our leasing brokers knew everybody, knew every single corner. So we're able to really get all of this information from within Crack.
But you had to go out and gather it, or it was already available like in you just plug in the address and
It's a mix. So we would go to CoStar and we would search for every single property. It would show the rents, it would show the CAM, but then to double check that, because CoStar is not always right, you want to call the broker and say, hey, what do you guys think of this center? What's happening over here? CoStar says $30, but that's just the asking rate. Are you doing deals at $15? Are you doing deals at $30? You know. And I think one of the things is this also really came to our network. You know, I think one of the biggest things in real estate is knowing everybody, knowing all the leasing agents, knowing all the brokers, because they're going to be more forthcoming with that information. And if you just call them and say, hey, what's this rent, that they may not really tell you because they don't know who you are and why you're asking. But if you're good friends with them and you've gone to events with them and sat down with them, they're a little bit more forthcoming with the information. So as far as sales comps, we wanted to see not what the center was worth now, but what it was worth upon the time of sale. So we looked at throughout Broward County, other centers ranging, call it between 80,000 and 150,000 feet. So we knew that things were trading, call it for 5.5, 5.25, 5 cap. Some of the lower end centers, more of the strip centers, were trading at a 6 cap. So we knew that on the high end, this thing would probably be worth or a 6 to a 6.5 cap. On the lower end, we thought it would probably be maybe a 5.25, 5.5 cap. Here's just some other comps. I think one of the other things to note is we really look at two numbers. We look at one, the cap rates, and then two, the price per foot. Because a lot of people look at the metrics of, well, what can I build this for, and what am I buying it for? So if I can build something for, call it 300 a foot, but I'm buying it for 500 a foot, does that really make sense? But then the other variable, well, is there any land even available to even build? So after doing that, let me show you what Plaza originally looked like. This is what the center originally looked like at the time of the acquisition. All of the available space is colored in this light beige. So we knew that we had a ton of space available, and what could we do with that? one of the things that we figured was, you know what, why don't we make all of this one big box? So, and I'll show you on the next plan, we ended up leasing almost all of this to Total Wine. And then we said, you know what, all of this shop space is going to be really hard to lease. You have no parking here, and it's facing this way, it's not with the rest of this center. So we could do one of two things. We could, if shop space over here is averaging, call it 28 to 35, this would probably have to be 15, maybe $20 at a real big discount. Or can we extend this and make this into a second box? And we already know we have Total Wine, so can we get Trader Joe's or another grocer or Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whoever it is. So with that in mind, we went to our architects and we said, you know what would this look like on a few different iterations? What can we do? So they came back and they built out the space for Total Wine. One of our first thoughts was, what if we make this more into a entertainment sort of entertainment and food and things like that. So we built this, or we had the design of doing a fountain and then doing a driveway through here. So we ended up, or not ended up, but one of our thoughts was to cut all of this out. But the problem with that is we lose space, we lose NOI, so now our construction costs are much higher and our NOI is down. So we ended up scrapping that plan. And all of them have it, but I'm going to show you the different iterations. So first we had the Trader Joe's, like I was talking about, on the left-hand side. And then we thought, what if we don't get that box? So now we've made a box out of all of this hard-to-lease shop space, and then left this shop space. One of the variables is that on a big box deal, your rent may only be $10-15, but on the shop space it may be $30. So even though you increase the square footage, you don't necessarily increase all of the income.
I'm just curious, what did you quote Publix at per square foot?
What do you mean?
I'm doing a deal right now for a plaza, and Publix doesn't budge on much. I'm just curious if you have Publix on a deal.
Well, it depends. It depends how bad they want to be there. It depends if it's a new deal, if it's an old deal. Depends if they have term left. If you're doing a old Publix that's currently there and they have 30 years left on their lease, and you want them to jack up their rent, they're going to say, okay, fine, but you have to give me $1 million in
A new facade.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if it's a brand new deal, they're paying up now, and you can maybe get them to 12, 13, 14 bucks.
Okay.
But a lot of the older deals are at
7.
6, 5, 4,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Got it.
So we ended up nixing that plan because of the drive aisle. Let's see if this one. And we said, no, let's keep all of this shop space as is, and let's go that route. So during our initial acquisition discussions, Trader Joe's was very active. They were looking to be in the suburban markets, so we were working with them, and which is why all of our plans show them. Which was nice because you killed off all this weird, funky space, which was all here, and you extended the ascent. And then the other thing is, Trader Joe's is known to be a higher rent payer. So can you get them to 20 bucks a foot, high teens? And that's just their facade. What it's on. So with all of that, we ended up throwing everything into Argus. Argus we only use for our cash flows only, so we would enter in the income, the expenses, and it would spit everything out. And then once everything's spit out, we have a in-house model that we built. Have you guys used Argus or familiar with it? And that's Argus AE or DCF?
Both, we're doing enterprise now.
Oh, really? So basically what we'll do is, Argus is a great tool, but Argus is a great tool for cash flows. Once you start, at least in our experience, once you start to use it for anything else and you add in the debt and you add in the waterfalls and you add in the equity and everything else, it starts to get a little bit cumbersome. So what we'll do is we'll create a model and we'll have a Argus tab. And we'll just take the Argus cash flow, dump it in here, and then everything else just comes out of life. So we ended up throwing it in here. And we usually like to build to IRRs of, call it high teens, low 20s, multiples on the equity side of like a 1.8 to a 2.1. At this time, there was value add deals that we get done. Now those deals are much harder to find. So what this model does is it allows us to really see what we can pay. So we would go through, and this is just one of 50 models. We ran one with Trader Joe's, one with Total Wine, but what if nothing happens and the deal stays stagnant? What happens if the shop space never gets leased? What happens if the shop space is leased at 20 bucks instead of 30 bucks? So we want to be comfortable on all levels, knowing that no matter what happens, we're not going to lose money. So if you guys can see, so let's just say the owner was originally asking $30 million. At $30 million, we were only building to just under a 13 and a 1.9x, which is on a multiple level it's good, but on an IRR basis it's low. And why that's important to us is because of the waterfalls. Our promotes don't hit until we make 12% IRR, sometimes a 15% IRR. We always want that IRR at a really, really pop. So we kept on digging and we would change the exit price, what happens if, and on this model we were a little bit conservative because we didn't know where the market would be in the next 5 years. So you could change this to, call it a 7 cap, and what happens then, and everything just changes. So after going through this model over and over again, we figured our purchase price was $26 million. We would exit at 6 3/4. with $26 million, we got to an IRR of just under a 20 and a multiple of a 2.06, which at all levels felt really good. One of the things, so CREC operates as the operating partner, meaning that on most deals, the equity is not usually all ours. We'll usually do a 90-10 split, 80-20, 70-30, depending on deal size. On this deal, we ended up bringing in Lucrative Adler, which is a big fund out of Philly. So they came in and they ended up providing 90% of the equity. The whole dollar equity check was about 13.2. We put in 1.3, and they put in the remaining amount. And then what's nice about this is that it also shows once we sell, what happens to CREC, what happens to Lucrative Adler. So once our promotes hit, and I'll go through that in a second, we would end up with a 3.22 multiple and an IRR of 31. They ended up with a 1.93, which, okay, so they get 20 less bips on their equity, but that's really not a lot in a whole lot of the dollars.
But your loan to value is like 50%?
What was that?
Your loan to value is like 50%?
So on this deal, it was a little bit complicated because this was a owner who had owned it for the last 30 years. He had built it, and all of his financials were just really bad. He was using QuickBooks and just really wasn't doing everything right. So we ended up getting seller financing. So the seller financed $13.7 million of it, knowing that we had to close and we couldn't get a bank to get really comfortable within the next 30 days. So what happened is, and I'll go through that in a second, we ended up going to the market 6 months later once we had the property, I don't want to call it stabilized, but we had all of our leases in a place. So that way we could get the maximum loan proceeds. So on this deal, the acquisition debt, he did 13.7, and then we refinanced out of it. It ended up being for 15 million, not 15.5, but then plus we got an additional 8 million or $7 million available for TIs, LCs, CapEx. Let me show you, I guess, what happened. So we bought it. 6 months later, we went to the market, like I said, to get a loan. We actually ended up doing a loan with my former classmate at the time. So we went to, call it 10 different banks. The top one was Mercantile Bank. A close friend of mine, Claudia, who I met in the program here, worked at, so she was able to get me the debt financing on that. And once we went through that, let me show you the end result. So after about a year and a half, we turned all of that empty shop space into Total Wine, like I mentioned before. We were able to lease up almost everything. And then in addition to that, we were able to expand the center by about 15,000 feet, and we were able to add in Orchard. Orchard at the time was a great deal for us. We were able to extend them by 15,000 feet, so increasing the leasable area. So Orchard at the time is still backed by Lowe's. So we had credit of a multi-billion-dollar company. We were worried about that they previously went into bankruptcy and knew that they were having difficulty, but knowing that Lowe's is never going to miss out on a rent check, we were fine with it. However, because we're the operating partner and we were sort of a quick flip and dump, we figured, you know what, once we have the orchard supply done, built out, leased, let's go to market and sell it. So that's basically what we did. We ended up going to market. We ended up selling it for $46 million.
What was the whole time on that?
Whole time was about 3 years. So we originally underwrote it as a 5-year deal, but because the center was 100% leased, and one of the things about the waterfall is because it was a IRR-based waterfall, we were incentivized to sell quickly, right? Because if the IRRs call it 50, our promotes hit much stronger.
What do you mean by waterfall?
Let's go through that in a second. So waterfall is basically your splits. So if you and a friend are building a house and you invest 10% and he invests 90%, but he does absolutely nothing. He just sits there and watches you. Is it fair for the end results to be 90-10?
No.
Or should it be 80-20 at the end? Or should it be 50-50? I mean, just because the initial equity is 90-10, it doesn't always mean that the end results are 90-10. Sometimes that's, you're putting in all of the work, you're doing all the leasing, you're doing all the management, you're doing all the thoughts and designs and everything else. And in addition to that, a lot of these funds will never sign recourse or anything else. So what we do is we say, okay, fine, we'll take on the responsibilities. We'll sign off on the bad boy carve-outs, meaning if we do anything faulty and we cause the property to go in distress and the loan and the bank comes after us, they're going to come after us, not you. And because of that, we're able to say, at the end result, let's do an 80-20 deal, 70-30, but it's based on sort of hurdles. And that first hurdle might be 8% IRR, then after that, then it's 80-20, and then to a 15, and then after that, it's 50-50. And then this is the final calculation of what actually happened. Loaded the wrong one, but that's okay. So, when we talk about waterfalls, this is what it is here. So, the capital account was 90-10. So, on our first hurdle, we said, up until a 10% IRR, we'll split the profits 90-10. Anywhere after that, up to a 17, we'll split the profits 72-28, which means 20% promote. And then anything after that, we'll split 63-37 on a 30% promote. Now, one of the things to be cautious of is if you're dealing with a smart fund, they'll always add in a 1.7 multiple or 1.5 or whatever it is, because if you hit it out of the park, and on this deal our IRR was a 36 almost. So if you hit it out of the park, you might get to the second hurdle, but they may only get returned 1.3 times their money, because the IRR is only a function of time value of money. It's not an actual multiple or anything else. So they're going to say, you know what, on the second hurdle, no matter how good you do, I want a 1.7 minimum. And then after that, then you hit your 63, the 37. Do you guys know how promotes work and how they're calculated?
This class we're working on, so.
Okay. So, basically means, so if, how do I put this up?
The button over there to the left, on the, up behind you.
This guy?
Yep. Push it up one more.
So if our first deal's 90-10, right? But then we want to say we want to get a 20% promote after that. So basically the first 20% goes to us, and what's remaining is 80%. And then that 80 is split 90-10, which is really, so 8% plus a 20, so that's 28%, plus that, so it gets you to 72%. Then the same thing over here, 30, so the first 30 goes to us, and what's remaining is 70, 10, 90, so we get to the 37. And that's how promotes work. And now on this deal, we decided to structure it that way because there wasn't any cash flow. Now, there's other promotes that are true on cash flow, right? So if you have cash flow at, call it 11%, why shouldn't you get a promote on the actual cash flow instead of getting a promote on the back end? Which sort of it's because if you have a promote on the back end, it incentivizes the operating partner to sell early. Whereas if you have a promote on the cash flow, you're hitting that promote, but it doesn't always incentivize you to sell very quick. So all in all, we got the 36 and the 2.04, and let's see how that compared to what we underwrote. What we underwrote was a 19 and a 2.06. So on a multiple level, we got the same exact thing, but note that our hold period was 3 years versus 5. So we have less cash flow for the last 2 years, and our IRR was 36 versus 19, which goes back to the point, which is why we were incentivized to sell now, because our promote was 36, and knowing that the property was stabilized, the IRR over time, over year 4 and year 5 would have gone down. So maybe instead of a 36, it would have been 30 or 32. And then how did that end up for us? So then we have this sort of waterfall calculation. The first hurdle's to a 10, like I mentioned. And then the next hurdle So if you look here, on the second hurdle, our RRR was 17, but it was less than the 1.7. We had to go back, we had to calculate it, and say, okay, we met the 17, but we didn't meet the 1.7. So now we have to calculate it on 1.7. So we ended up with the 1.7, and if you notice, their IRR, just because of the 1.7, jumped from 25, what it would have been at the 17. So it cost us real dollars, but on their part it was very smart to add it in. And what we ended up with on the last promote was 63 to 37, and what we ended up was here. So on an IRR basis, it was a great deal. On a multiple, it was good. It wasn't great. I mean, on the operating partner side, we would love to hit a 4 or 5 or a 6, but for a deal this size, hitting almost a 3.75, it was pretty good for us. And let me show you what would have happened if that was 0. Right, so if the cash flow multiple was 0, we went from a 3.68 multiple to a 3.9, which represents about $400,000 in additional proceeds that we would have received. Any questions or anything
So
on
that's better than your expectation going on into this deal.
Yeah, it was this deal was much better than our expectations. We did not expect to lease it to Orchard Supply, which took so much square footage and also allowed us to add the 15,000 feet. On top of that, we sold it for a 5.7 cap, I want to say, which at the time was very, very strong. We didn't expect to get that, but because of the credit behind Orchard and the credit behind Total Wine, although it's a private company, they do extremely well. And we all know what happened with Orchard, where a year later they went out of business, and now that's now empty.
Did they come to you, or you found them? Or
So Orchard came to the market, and I guess one of the important facts or lessons I would learn is that it's just being in touch with leasing brokers, being in touch with the market. We knew that they wanted to be in South Florida. In South Florida, there's not many boxes available, especially on corridors where there's traffic counts of 60, 70, 80,000 cars a day. They ended up doing 6 deals in South Florida. Our tenant reps went to them, or our landlord reps went to them. We ended up making a deal. It was a beautiful store, it did good, but the Osh brand was less than 1% of Lowe's income, and I just don't think it was a good fit for Lowe's. So Lowe's ended up closing all of their stores. The box is now empty, but Colliers leases it now, and they're trying to backfill it with like a gym or some other use. If you look at this space, it's really funky. So let me.
So immediately after the sale, did Craig retain the property management rights? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
So we sold it to a friendly buyer. We sold it to Zurich. Zurich bought our office building in Coral Gables probably a year and a half prior. So we still managed and leased that for them. They bought a office building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. We do the management and leasing on that. And when we sold this, we also retained management and leasing. And one of the things that why we sold it, and why we were worried, Orchard Supply, so they have 2 entrances. They have an entrance here, and they have an entrance on their backside. Their backside is their main entrance. If you look at the aerial, their main entrance is 50 feet from residential, who wants their entrance facing residential. And we knew that if they were to leave at any point, backfilling that box would be extremely hard. So whether it was a 24-hour fitness or some other use, people are going to want their front entrance facing university, not residential. Let me see if I can pull up the areas.
So I understand that, while it's two separate businesses of acquiring the property and obviously owning it, do you, I guess, how do you account for the financial benefit of the property management being in-house and then also retaining those rights? Do you try to account for that in your modeling at all, or?
No.
Okay.
No, at the end of the day, our platform is sort of completely separated.
Yep.
Because we're investing our own dollars. So just because we get a few more dollars from over here, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us. When we invest, we're not investing on behalf of CREC. We're investing on behalf of ourselves. So
Okay.
It's our own personal money. It's not CREC's money or anything else.
Okay.
It's really friends and family. And if you can see here, this is the back side of the center, and Orchard's main entrance is what it's here, which was just a funky layout. There's no real parking here. So that's one of the real reasons why we sold so quickly, and for us it turned out well.
So what's your average holding period then?
Our average holding period, probably 5 years. Our deal in Coral Gables, which we sold the office building, we held for 10 years. That was really because of when we bought it, when the cycle happened. I would say about 5 years. We underwrite everything on multiple scenarios. We underwrite them at 3 years, 5 years, but we also want to be comfortable owning them at 10 years. We want to know that the cash flow in years 5 through 10 are going to be enough to pay for the loan and still give us a few bucks in our pocket, because what happens if there's another downturn? We don't want to be put in a position where we're forced to sell. We hold things because it's just not the right time, and if it's not the right time, then we're just not going to sell.
So is your management fee then is still an expense? So you're
Yes.
still, so the management, but even though they're the same company, is it because of where the money is coming from that it's not included like Dr. Foley was saying, included in your overall IRR because it's two separate?
Yeah, it's completely two separate platforms. One of the reasons why these big funds and our friends and family trust in us is because we know the market extremely well. We know the market because of management and leasing. And we're able to use those skills and apply it to the acquisition. So because of that, we say, you know what, our acquisition side is completely separate from the management and leasing side. On a monetary side. On the information side, there's no wall or anything else. We pass information. I go to our leasing brokers and to the manager, and it also incentivizes us to do sort of a better job at management and leasing, knowing that, hey, if we ever want money from Looper Dowler again, we better do a really good job on the management and leasing.
Do you make that as a part of the, in order to move forward, you want to retain your management rights?
Yes, so during the initial acquisition, absolutely. We have to retain management. Leasing, not so much, right? Because we're on the equity side and we're here to make money. We're not here to have this fund the bills. We're not doing acquisitions to feed our management and leasing team. So like, we just bought a deal in Tallahassee last year. We don't have a Tallahassee leasing agent. So we ended up doing the management in-house, but we did the leasing on a third-party basis. So we said, hey, who's the best leasing agent? It may not be Craig or Colliers at the time when I was there, so let's use the best person for the job. We bought an office building in Orlando. We have an Orlando team, but that's on the retail side. And we didn't want retail leasing agents leasing office buildings, so know what? Who's the best leasing agent in Orlando? So it's preferred that we use it for management and leasing, but it's not a must-have.
Zurich bought the building 46 million or something you said?
Yes.
They obviously saw money in the deal. You must have seen the same money they were looking at. Why give it up?
So Zurich's a different type of holder. Zurich's an insurance company who just wants Class A stabilized assets, and they're fine with getting 5-6% on their money. We're not. You know, I could go off and invest funds in bonds and stocks. I can get 3, 4, 5%. But where I make my money, where Craig makes its money, is by getting
Higher yield.
3-4 times our money in, call it 3 to 5 years. Versus Zurich, they'll probably hold this thing for 15 years. They don't underwrite an exit. They underwrite what's the cash flow, what's my yield every single year, and that's all I really care
Looking for a
about.
stable place to put their money.
Exactly. Exactly. So this is what the center ended up looking like at the end of the day. I think one of the most, that's a new Total Wine. That's, so if you look here, this is the orchard on the front side facing University. It's nothing really impressive. One of the big things is this wall right here. It's not really popping or anything else. So they ended up building it on the backside, which is a much more grander front entrance. Anything else I can talk to you guys about the deal, or questions, or waterfalls, or?
What's the usual, like, when you look at the kind of competition in there, what's the usual radius, like, it's out there that you look at?
It depends. If we want to do a Publix deal, we may only look at a 1 or 2 mile radius. If we're looking at a deal with a Ross and a TJ Maxx in Burlington, they may be 1 every 5 miles. Or like Total Wine, right? Total Wine's sort of that destination place where you're not there every single day. They only have one, probably in the closest one, probably 10 to 15 miles from here. So it just depends on what asset, or if you're building a single tenant CVS, your trade area may only be a half a mile. So it really depends what tenant you're really looking for.
And then what associations have you found to be the most profitable? Like, where have you met most of your connections? Like,
There's a ton, I mean,
like ICSC?
ICSC has probably been the most beneficial to me. I say going to the Orlando show, going to the local shows. If you're available to go to the Vegas show, I think they're all highly worthwhile. One of the biggest cards that you can play is the whole, I'm a student and I want to learn. And if you ask people and you tell them, I just want to learn, I'm a student, help me out, they'll probably give you more information than they would to me. Because they know that you're a student and you're not going to use this information and divulge it to the competition, or that you're using it because you're building a center next door. Whereas me, I ask them something, they may be a little bit hesitant and, hey, why is Andrew asking? What deal does he have that he needs this for? Is he trying to steal Publix and take them to his center, or whatever it is? And then locally, I mean, there's a ton of just local, smaller networking groups. I know there's one that meets once a month at I think the Wharf in Miami, and there's a bunch of others, I think, but the closest connection that I've gotten, who I'm still close with, is from here. I mean, the deal here I did with the banker at Mercantile, who I met here. One of my best friends is on the acquisition side as well, so we're always going back and forth on deals. So I think most important is really to stay in contact with the people in here, because you don't know what will happen next 5 years or so.
How are you able to expand the footprint on the total one, or the orchard? You were able to expand that much bigger.
Yeah, so.
Did you lose parking? Did you?
So we lose a little bit of parking, but not a lot. So if you look here, so Orchard Supply really,
You almost doubled the size of it, right?
well, so Orchard Supply took all of this, and we had to kick out 2 tenants. We moved this one over here. So they took from here to here, and they added 15,000 feet by going backwards this way.
Okay. You just went to the city and said, we'd like to expand.
Exactly, which was a little bit of a nightmare. There was a big FPL line, so one of the power lines ran right through here, which meant moving that around the building, so that took 6 months. And then one of the other key things that Orchard said was, if I'm coming down Royal Palm and I'm heading east, the guy here can't make a left-hand turn into here. So this is all a median, and the only way to get to my store is by them making a U-turn and turning in here, or making that left, can't turn in left here, and going all the way here and then coming back around. So we said, okay, fine. So we ended up, it should be on the area. I don't know if you can see it on this, but we ended up building and going to the Department of Transportation, the city and the county, and we build a curb cut right here, which allowed visitors to make a left here and go straight into their store, which I think one of the biggest things for tenants is access. They want their customers to make left in, left out, which just makes it much easier, because if access is hindered, a lot of people won't come and they'll drive past the center and maybe they'll go to the next part of my store.
You had to pay for that?
Yeah, yeah.
How long was that process?
That ran with the FPL timelines. That was probably about 6 months as well. Maybe like a little bit longer. Dealing with state and county and city agencies tend to be a little bit difficult, especially county. The city of Coral Springs, they're really pro-development, so they were actually pretty easy to work with. They were really behind us for whatever we wanted to do, and there was some things, and you can't paint the building this color and stuff like that, but outside of that, it was just pretty easy, a pretty smooth process.
So, back to your waterfall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, you know, the way that you had it set up, there was a multiple in there, right?
Yes.
The 1.7. So is the 1.7 fully satisfied, like on a reversion like this, right? 'Cause I don't know what the cash flow side was, if there was any, but on the reversion, so it has to hit 1.7, right? Compared to what they invested before you guys get any return?
Not before we get any, so
So it's not,
they didn't have preferred equity, so
Okay.
preferred equity means that they get paid back first.
right,
Our equity was always equal,
okay.
so anytime anytime a dollar was distributed, we would always get some portion of
You're right.
that.
Okay.
But it just so happened that the second tier was the greater of 15% IRR, and if that doesn't hit the 1.7, then a 1.7x.
Okay, so then for your promote, then underneath that, did that function as like a preferred on the distribution?
So the last hurdle, so it was basically any dollars left over after the 1.7 was a simple 63-37.
Okay.
So 37 went to us, 63 went to them, and then keep in mind that it started from 9 to 10. So going from 9 to 10 to 63-37,
Right,
so our
right.
10 went from 10 to 37, which is good. I would say we're doing deals a little bit more aggressive now with the hedge funds. This is sort of what they like to see with friends and family. You're able to push the envelope a little bit more. People really care about cash flow, so I'm able to. So now instead of having IRR promotes, I'll sort of have cash flow promotes. So I'll say if I have a deal that's generating a 12% cash on cash, I get to promote anything after an 8.
Yeah, so then you get.
Which our cash flow turns from 12% to almost 20% on the promoted side. On the unpromoted side, it'll be probably a 9 or a 10.
So then, in that instance, are you keeping like the equity the same? Like, so they'll get a preferred at 8%, like first, and then you split the remainder, or you keep it to balance?
On deals that I'm doing, we're doing no preferred deals, so everything's equal. Any dollar out is split between both.
Okay.
Now, there are preferred equity deals, but those are a little bit more
So then,
expensive.
right, so then is that 8% in that case, is that a cap for like their return?
No, it's not necessarily a cap, it's just a hurdle, right? So
Okay.
it's equal distribution until an 8, then anything after an 8, we'll say, no, what, then our promote kicks in, and now that our 90-10 turns into 50-50, 60-40, or anything like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Which, on the deals that we're doing now, our promotes are more like that. It's not IRR based, because we're looking at more of long-term ownership. You know what, maybe the next 3 deals we buy, we'll only sell 1. We want to create sort of long-term generational income that'll have just steady cash flow every single year versus having a pop here, maybe a pop there, and a pop here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You said that was an off-market deal, right? Can you kind of explain how you contacted the owner and how that all, and I know you started doing the market research on making, figuring out what shopping centers had the different retailers, like, what made you start spinning your wheels on taking the time to do all that research?
So-
Like, how did you know that you could get it under contract?
Well, I think one of the things that I've sort of been accustomed to is no matter where I drive, I'm always looking around. Always noticing, oh, hey, what does that center look like? And what should it be? My wife is constantly yelling at me because I'll take the long way and I'll drive through a shopping center, I'll look at here, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, because I want to see this. So we just noticed a shopping center was only 50% occupied. But you know what? That shouldn't be 50% occupied. So let's at least reach out to the owner. It happened to be good timing. The owner was probably 90 years old, very, very sick. His sons didn't want to take it over. And it was probably a 6-month process of meeting with him once every couple of weeks, and then that turned into once a week and meeting with his attorney. So it was a gradual process of him sort of trusting us. So I think this case was a little bit different. It's not your normal, an investor owns it, here's my price, take it or leave it, and that's it. This was more about building a relationship and him trusting us, because this was his baby. He built it 30 years ago, and he wanted to sell it to somebody who he knew would turn into something more.
So after you identify a property like that, you then would do the lead work that you were explaining earlier in identifying the tenants that possibly can go there as part of your due diligence before you.
Let me show you a site. So, are you guys familiar with the website Sites USA? So Sites USA is a good tool that we use that's a void analysis, and we can plug in really anything. And I can plug in an address and say who's not here. Where's the local, where's the nearest Total Wine, where's the nearest Kohl's? And it'll show me if they're there or if they're missing. So let's plug in.
You need to switch it to laptop.
I could run a void analysis, and I can say my center doesn't have a craft store. So where's the nearest craft store?
Is that free, or do you have to have a subscription?
This is a subscription base. I could run it. And then this will pop up and say, there's a Michael's there, there's a Michael's there, there's a Hobby Lobby, a Joanne Fabrics. And then it'll also show me, it'll create a PDF, and it'll say, okay, so there's a Hobby Lobby in the market, there's already a Joann Fabrics, there's a Michaels, but AC Moore's missing. And AC Moore's only 15 miles away, so maybe AC Moore wants to be here. And I can use this software for really anything. For banks, for convenience stores, really any category that you can think of. In addition, this site will run demos, drive times, any type of maps you want. It'll create PDFs of those maps. So it's a really good tool to have and how to use.
Again, what's the
I don't know.
site, what again?
Sites USA.
So you-
Hold on, is it sites or sites? Yeah, sites.
So you-
Sites USA, one word, dot.
.com.
So you would not, okay, so if you're purchasing because I have a shopping center in my mind, right? And they have low tenants, there's only like 3 tenants in there. So you would actually create in your mind places that can go there, that you already have relationships with those businesses before you even move forward on the purchase because you've already leased it out technically.
Yes, I mean, I would like to. I mean, I think having a bird in the hand is very helpful, and it allows you to pay that much more, because if the next guy comes along and he has a tenant in hand, he's able to pay more than you because you don't really know what you're doing. But if you're able to say, you know what, hey, Starbucks, I know you're gonna pay $30 a foot here. Now I can really pay $5 million for the shopping center because I really wasn't sure, and I can get shop rents at $22, but maybe I could get 25, but you never underwrote 30 because you never knew you could get there. But at the same time, it's also intuitive, and it's like, okay, this is university. I don't know who's gonna be here, but I know it's an active corridor. Rents are here. Occupancy's at 95%, and if somebody wants to be on this location, there's nowhere else to go. So I know I can find that tenant. The rent may be $2 or $3 off, so it really depends, but you would always prefer to have a business plan before you always buy.
Okay, and even though this particular property that you were talking about was not for sale, you just contacted the owner and just said, hey, you know, it's 50% empty, would you be interested in selling?
Exactly, yeah, and that's what we typically try to do, right, because there's two types of deals. There's marketed deals, which the HFFs have, and the CBs, and the Cushmans, which is great, but guess what? 100 other guys are looking at the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So you're only one up against the next guy is having a better business plan than him, and knowing that this tenant is going to come here, or this tenant, or maybe your capital is just really, really cheap and you can afford or pay more. But if you're finding an off-market deal, you're not competing with the 100 other people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. All right, let's take about a 5-minute break.
Will you say me, like, who else would you talk about?
Thanks.
I figured it out, though. I was overthinking it.
Because sometimes it's tricky. Just that way. You know what I do? I used to take a piece of paper and write everything
What's
written
the,
down, so whatever
That's the one.
I had input, I cross out.
Ah. just don't move on to the next thing until it's finished.
Yeah, like I would really like take this and like find a piece of paper, okay?
Show your
This
assignment,
is
show your
that.
assignment.
Don't remember that, like,
It's just a paragraph, you know?
no, yeah,
No, just
that's the way it is.
You
And that's
definitely
the,
gotta go through it.
and that's the
One
way
class with
the
18
test is
minutes.
gonna be.
Midterm?
Yes, it's gonna be exactly.
What is it, midterm time or something?
It
Is
is.
that what it is?
And everybody here is the full day.
I'm like,
But you
It's a
create,
lot.
It's a little above.
it's exactly
I mean, I
the
would say
same
70%.
format, like you will
Once you
get
get that, then we
you will get a
have
problem
it.
like this, so lay it out like this, on a piece of paper, like take it and write it, because he's not gonna give you the order, so you know how you have
this
different
order
tabs?
from here,
Yeah,
yes.
this has the order, so you follow like tab number one, tab number two, this one doesn't have it.
Oh, yeah?
That's what I used to do, every single exercise, I would just write it in the like I would create this complete space, and then start reading and placing it in the right.
Especially,
So when I had input, I would have to go
especially
back and forth.
calculating.
and figure out what the
Exactly, I would just follow the same order, instead of going back and forth, where you would get.
Of, well, what happens if this happens, and you have to meet this hurdle first, but then
And
this
that's why I
hurdle,
just like doing it.
and having it all sort
I
of
hate to
flow
stop
and not
and
having
start
to
doing
make
it, because it's like,
entering.
now I gotta remember.
And then it was second guess what you
So
did.
if you had made a mistake, like,
Well, yeah, so
you're gonna find that
the
mistake.
one thing you remember sometimes,
Yeah, 12, you know.
the lawyers don't necessarily know the numbers behind
Whenever I
it.
had a
So
technical
to
question
have
or
them
something that wasn't making any sense.
draft up a contract that
He's
states one
really
thing,
helpful.
doesn't always, match
Yeah, he
with
sits
what the
down
numbers
with you
are.
and actually goes
That's
through the whole thing and that he
difficult
will
thing,
try
but
to
which is
figure
why
out.
we try and keep it simple. Just say, no, cash flow is this, it promotes this, and everything after that is.
It's in the order, I know them.
So then do you guys know?
But in this one,
Yes, yeah, so we'll always do very special ones, like 8, that's 80/20, 90/10.
red,
Yeah,
The capital reserve, and then the higher, yeah.
This is, pretty sure.
That way it's not perfect.
Pretty sure, oh no, there was one of the ones that
Is
there was
that
no
part
part
where
where
we
it's
still
still
put
turned.
turn?
You know, so that's easy left to go.
Yeah.
8% is, and then I ended up doing it after that, I'm just checking the 50, which is nice sometimes, because you have nobody in, right? So if you put the deal together.
Right, I was like, what's going on here?
Bucks,
Then he puts it.
He really had these format and he forgot to take it out.
I actually don't, I just started at,
10 cents maybe? I don't know if that was like income tax, like that's like standard, you know? So I put 10 and then I went to the reports, because I was going to tax.
and that's my new one.
Yeah, when I showed it to zero,
Yep, see you on Thursday. All right, guys. All right, Andrew. Nice to meet you. All right, sounds
already got it.
I didn't do well. Look at that.
He's never here.
That was like do well this one.
One barrel of and
Look, you still don't seem as weak as they do.
How far you got with it?
The first module.
So it'll be like 3,
I want to see before and
Like the fourth, like,
Where were you?
I got all of it.
Oh,
I started doing it, and I got to the last part. But I would say the odds that 10%. You might make it. I did I got to this part.
Somebody back, we're still missing one. Who's there? You know? Who's there?
I've seen him, man.
I don't know his name.
Oh, Sean.
Shock.
When do it matter?
Yeah, you
Okay, you have one more little assignment to do for next week. We're going to talk about that right now. So this is also going to be a little group assignment, okay? You and pick a partner, okay? Doesn't have to be the last partner you had in the last class. Could be another one in this class or for this project. What you're going to do is you're going to take the deal structure worksheet or spreadsheet and you're going to expand it, okay? You're going to modify it. How you modify it is sort of up to you. But at a minimum, okay, you will add at least one more partner to the deal, okay? So in other words, right now, the spreadsheet that you've got is what? You have developer, and then you have investor partner 1, you're going to add investor partner 2 at a minimum, okay? You can add more than 1. You can add 2 or 3 if you want to. Realize, obviously, it gets a little bit more complex the more folks you add, okay? So that's at minimum what you have to do in the assignment, okay? The second thing that you have to do at a minimum is you have to write up a very short PowerPoint narrative of your deal. In other words, you're going to find a property. Don't make this complicated. You're going to find a property that's potentially for sale, or you can get on LoopNet, whatever. Find a property that's for sale. Sort of talk about, here are the cash flows that you would anticipate it would be throwing off. Here's how much you anticipate buying it for. Here's how much you anticipate selling it for. Let's say 5 years later. Putting it into the deal structure sort of framework, and then showing how each party would be paid, when they would be paid, how much they would be paid, okay? And explain in the narrative, once again, we're not talking about overly complicated narrative, but explain why you would be paying the developer this amount, why you would be paying the investor 1 this amount, and then why you would be paying any other investors another amount. Now, what I mean by that is just like Andrew was talking about, okay? You may have the developer that's taking on all of the risk, all of the property management role, all of the sort of construction piece to it. And so therefore, one would expect they're gonna get a nice little chunk of the pie later on, okay, relative to somebody that's just providing the money and not participating in any way. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so all your narrative is gonna do, and we're talking about like, you know, half a slide on a PowerPoint, okay? Just explaining, you know, here is what, you know, the developer's gonna receive, here's why they are gonna receive what they're gonna receive, and how much they're gonna be paid, and so forth, so on. So you're gonna have no more than 5 total PowerPoint slides, okay? That is your upper limit on this assignment, okay? Now, you don't have to have 5. If you have 4, if you have 3, but you're probably gonna need at least 3, okay? And so, once again, just to recap, once again, those of you walked in a few minutes late, so your assignment for next week, pick a partner, one partner only, okay? And with that partner, you are gonna co-develop basically a modified deal structure spreadsheet that you are then going to present the spreadsheet and up to 5 PowerPoint slides explaining what you did in that spreadsheet to the class next week. Your presentations, if you sort of think about it, we've got, you know, let's say roughly 30 people, so it'll be 15 groups. We're not going to do probably more than 5 to 10 minutes at the most, you know, for probably each group. So you kind of get up, show us what you did, explain what you did, why you did what you did, and then sit down, let the next group get up, do the same thing, okay? Does that make sense? All right? Now, as I said, at an absolute minimum, you must have at least one additional partner to the deal. In other words, you're going to, as we said, you have, in the original model that I gave you, you have the developer partner, then you have the investor partner. So at a minimum, you're going to add investor partner 2, but ideally, you may want to add 2 or 3 more partners with all kinds of complexities that you want to sort of throw into that, okay? And it's the complexities that are going to make it interesting, okay, to everyone, all right? And then explain why you did what you did with whatever property that you select. And once again, the easiest thing to do is you and your partner hop on LoopNet, you find a property that's, like I said, currently for sale, or find one that maybe has recently sold, get, you know, the bare basic kind of information, or estimate the information of what you would pay for it, what basically the NOI would be on the property, and ultimately what you think you would be able to sell it for after a 5-year holding period, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Yes or no? Okay, anybody have any questions about that? Okay, Sean, I think you had your hand up, did I answer it?
Yeah, you answered it.
Okay, anybody else? Yep,
Do you want it flashy, like creative,
yes,
PowerPoint?
yes.
Not
No,
that-
I want it to be interesting
Not
and
screenshots
compelling,
like so,
okay?
yeah.
And if you need help with that, talk to Erin. I'm sure she'd be
Yes,
more than happy
exactly.
to hire herself out in a nice hourly rate, you know, to help you out in
Why I
terms
asked, yeah.
of you know, getting it up to speed. But no, seriously, I do want you to try to, you know, invest a little bit of time and thought into this, because the whole idea behind this is so that you take what we've done in class, you expand on it a little bit so that you get a little bit of a deeper understanding, you know, of how to actually put this together. And instead of torturing you and having you do it completely on your own, I'm saying pick a partner that hopefully you can kind of work with, that maybe your skill sets are a little bit different than theirs. If they are really good at the quantitative piece of it and figuring all of the Excel part out, hopefully you can help them out with the presentation piece. Okay? All right? Does that make sense? All right? Yep.
Alright, so basically just, you want us to like add a partner, at least one partner to the sheet, change the, redistribute the equity percentage, figure out like the returns after sale, and then in the PowerPoint, you just want us talking about the returns?
Yeah, in other words, you're gonna say, okay, in other words, you're gonna say, okay, we found a property,
Right.
this property, we're able to buy it for $5 million, we're expecting annual NOI of whatever, $500,000 a year, and what we plan on selling it for $7 million, but over that holding period, we're gonna need to do some significant capital improvements to the property toward the beginning, and so the developer is gonna have to spend some effort, you know, doing that, and here's how we're gonna, in essence, reward them for that in terms of how this deal structure is put together. Okay, so it's a lot about, when I say the narrative is you telling the story of why this deal structure makes sense. Okay, because as you heard Andrew talk, and you heard even the other speakers to a certain extent, you know, talk about this as well, is, you know, it's not a fixed approach to how a deal structure works. You know, and I think you heard, I would hope you heard loud and clear today that you have, you know, once again, you have one investor, this, you know, what he was referring to, you know, the Zurich, you know, folks that bought their whole thing of buying the property. All they want is just a stable cash flow, okay? But then, you know, you have upfront, whenever you're investing in this deal, you know, with his partners, you know, they want a certain, you know, rate of return, and then above and beyond that, then it splits out. And he began to give some explanation as to why that, you know, one side would get a higher, basically, payout than the other. That's what I'm looking for, is that explanation.
So the presentation's gonna be the PowerPoint based on?
With the spreadsheet.
Oh, it's gonna be both, okay.
What you're probably gonna do is you're gonna pop up the spreadsheet and you're gonna say, here's my scenario. Here's the property we found, here are the characteristics of that property, here an explanation of who our developer is, who our partner number 1 is, our partner number 2, and potentially other partners. Here's how we're planning on paying them in terms of the distributions. And then you're going to flip over to the spreadsheet and basically say, all right, this now financially represents what I've just described.
Okay.
That would be the ideal presentation. Okay? But probably not just embed the spreadsheet within the PowerPoint, because then you're not going to be able to modify it.
Right.
What I may want to be able to do is to say, all right, prove to me that you didn't just hard code a bunch of numbers. I want to see your spreadsheet actually works. Okay, so change this and let's see if it works. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Questions?
Well, I mean, I know you just said it, but can we superimpose it as long as we have?
As long as you have.
Just like for the flow of the presentation.
That's fine, but you need to have the spreadsheet available, a workable spreadsheet that is not hard coded. And I am going to be adamant about that. I don't want you to just simply go in and try to calculate the numbers by hand and hard code the numbers into the spreadsheet to say, okay, we've added the other partner, you know, make sure that everything is functional, okay, and it works, and you test it, okay, all right. Anybody else? Okay, we good? All right. Well, with the exception of those presentations, which will take place next week, obviously the first half of the class, now pretty much we've only got a couple of things remaining. In a few minutes, what we're going to do, let you log on to your computers if you have not already and do the course evaluations, okay? Get those out of the way. If we can get 100% participation, I'll probably give you a couple of points, okay?
Nobody's leaving here until next time. Right? We're not going through this again.
What do we have, one person last time?
One or two.
Two people didn't do it last time?
All right, so that's, okay, hold on before you, okay, before you can do that, all right. So, if the course evaluation's done, second thing, obviously we've got test number 2 today, get that out of the way for those people that are going to be taking that. And then next week, obviously the presentations, the first half of class, and then at 10 o'clock, then we'll do the, basically the comprehensive final for those of you that want to do that. And then after that, obviously we're done. So we're pretty much done at this point with the exception of the presentations and that sort of thing. So any other sort of final questions or comments, observations before we kind of give you a chance to work on the course evaluations. And one thing I will take issue with, in the past, one of the things I don't quite understand, I know they ask a lot of weird questions, okay? There's like 40 questions, way too many questions, okay? Way too many questions. But one of the things that I found that really irritated me was that people would say that I'm somehow not available outside of class, okay? And I would get dinged on that with a low score. And I will tell you, any one of you that has ever asked me to meet with you,
Yes.
I will meet with you any time of the day, any day of the week, you know, so, you know, that was probably the one thing among all the other things that I would see on these course evaluations, that I would get like this low score of like, you know, out of a possible 5, I would get like a 2.2 or something. And I'm like, how can I possibly get a 2.2? I am here every day of the week, pretty much every morning, every night, every whenever. So of all the other things that you can rate me potentially down on that you don't like, I am accessible, okay? So that is a one thing that, yeah, just always irritates me. Okay, outside of that, I'm not gonna say anything else, yeah.
Could be the way they phrase it.
Well, and yeah, the phrasing of the question is probably,
I just clicked 5.
yeah, the phrasing of the question is probably, it's one of those things, is the instructor available outside of class or something like that? But, you know, anyway, you get my point.
Yeah, where they invert.
So, all right, with that, I'm gonna walk out of here, I'm gonna come back at 10 o'clock, and then we'll, for those of you that are staying to take the second test, we'll take care and administer that, and outside of that, that's it, okay? Okay, 2 questions. Who was first?
Ladies first.
Okay, go for it.
I just want to know how many questions are going to be on the
30.
Cumulative.
Both, 30.
30? Okay. That's it.
That was my exact question.
Okay, okay. It'll be evenly distributed among all the material.
Okay. Can you show us our grade?
I can, for a price.
Name your price.
I have everything here in the event that, yeah, you do want to see where you stand right now. I can, you know, give you that information. So anybody that is not certain about where they are. Now, the number and the score and the grade that I currently have calculated is based on you getting full credit for the spreadsheet next week. So if you don't do the spreadsheet or you do a crappy job, that number could go down, okay?
Chase on to that.
All right? Or not showing up, all right? But outside of that, everything is current. The only other, obviously, grade components would then be the exam today and then the final exam. So those people that are planning on taking both of those exams, then obviously their grade could be something dramatically different than what it currently is, okay? All right.
And the course evaluation is being counted for everybody that's here today.
No, it's 100% of whoever's enrolled in the class, which is 32 people.
32 people?
Yep.
How many is here yet?
I don't know, you guys figure it out.
I know Anthony.
Okay, so anybody that needs to know what their current grade is, you can come up and I will give you that. If you don't already know. Otherwise, let me just do this. Instead of him coming here, let me go out the hallway, and then you can just sort of come out there and I can finish you out there.
Oh, Angela, what I was telling you was she claimed me.
I don't know who that person, I got her until this time.
Okay, you're gonna be my attorney.
Yeah.
Where you got you. I got
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you staying with the test?
Yeah.
Okay, so
We'll do it like we did last time.
Idea course?
Yeah. We got 1 week, so. What is this one? Maybe we'll find a place so we
I think
can
there's also
It's in the
idea.
email, is it?
Yeah, like I checked.
figure out
I'm
all
pointing
the
at you with the
income
pen.
and everything. Set.
No.
Start, put it on the Excel spreadsheet.
Council.
And
What? I really don't know what you're asking me right now.
he's just saying, yeah, everything. You could have told him to find his library right now. He's like, yeah.
I trust him. Look at smile.
Southern accent smile.
yeah,
It's disarming.
the hard part will be making sure the spreadsheet works, I guess. Not really.
Huh.
Pretty good.
I wanna mark Fred down on the accessibility just cause, just to see him have like an angry.
That camera's so rolling.
Literally,
Yes.
pretty much, but I just doesn't click,
No, that's what I'm doing right now.
yeah. Skip. Yeah.
See, evaluation is really,
Also, you were one of the ones from last,
no, but is
semester.
it really private?
Yeah.
Anonymous?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Like, he wants
If it's anonymous, then why do they wait till the grades are issued?
That's a good question. That is a good question. We're told it's anonymous, I'd like to think it's a big deal issue that if it was.
Yeah, what's the perception of anonymous maybe?
Yeah, no, it's not all I'm gonna say is I.
4, 5, and 6, right?
Of course, evaluation.
It really screams.
I think that's a lot more like.
I just was describing it, I'm just not working from home, like, basically, all right. I work for.
I didn't see how you just.
I don't go down there very often. I've been I will pay you. I've never actually, I made it down. But I've been still not negotiation. It's brutal. I can't imagine that every day. I'll set what I'm trying to do. And you just send me whatever.
We gotta do the spreadsheet, but I'll be done.
Questionnaire, whatever.
There's the email.
Yeah.
So how, like this much, we did everything that was being honest. So like I've never put anything else to
You have a spreadsheet.
No, so we just use the one that you emailed to us?
Right, but you just have to tweak it to add
No, that's fine,
stuff,
that's fine.
yeah.
That's definitely a great foundation.
Reverse engineer the formulas.
Ryan, that's the
Reverse
third
engineer.
person.
Ryan's not here, our tutor.
What did you say?
I said Mike Oshman, the kid next to me.
Ryan, Anthony,
Brandon.
and Brandon, that's the four.
Okay, we're hunting them down.
For real, like, right?
Yeah, just right now.
That's the four.
Let them know that we know who they are. Because last time people just.
They're gonna show up next class the entire time. Waiting for them, like, with the.
I mean, everyone does it, I can get an A.
What, copy the whole class on the email? Did you do that?
I'm so ready.
Yes. I asked, so do we, I asked him if we had to do development to outside.
That's our capstone.
And he said, no, it won't affect your graduation. We can still roll this, because remember,
They only do one zero.
Wait, Manny, what do you say? Yeah, when they
we
do
walk
it?
with you.
No, I thought we knew that.
Then I wanted to confirm, because we were like speculating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we still gotta do development too after. So,
I think he's a great evaluator.
You take it?
Yeah. He is not our other.
I mean, I just, if someone to do it, we can extra points. I could do it just a little bit. That's like my stomach is.
Unless you want
What are you now?
I'll find the email and then we'll talk about that.
You did the email? Completed it. I didn't want to do the wall one yet. Yeah, but I'll do that. I want to see if he curves. I mean,
Somebody has to let him know.
it's the thing. The program requires you to do that. You can tell me. Yeah.
What are you talking? I'm trying to get a point here for vote.
Oh, God.
Everyone has to do
Which way to get it?
Yo que muy bien, todo muy bien.
Oh,
Yes.
Please, everyone, do your evaluation,
You did evaluation?
I already did it.
please, everyone, do your
But not
evaluation.
Everybody's here.
But we have 4 people.
We're missing 4 people.
Do you know who missing? I can't explain.
Everybody email them.
I need that 2 points.
Anthony,
Everybody send them an email.
Ryan.
Can I call him?
No, Ryan's gonna be here.
Wait,
Ryan probably
I
did it.
have a list of.
Please, everyone, do it. I need that 2 points, please.
Oh, we already know who we're missing. So someone has to contact Brandon, Ryan, I'll take care of Anthony, and Michael.
And we'll have time.
The one that left, that's here. What's his name again?
Yeah, I would probably.
I got him
You got him?
out,
Okay. Did you
yeah.
download it?
But Michael, I don't know, does
I
anybody
know
talk
Ryan,
to
but
Michael?
it's going to take place.
Angelo, don't you talk to Michael? If it's law class or study, adding points is the norm.
Yeah, I have his number. I have his number.
Oh,
You
please, I
have
need that
it?
2 points. Everyone, do your evaluation.
Yeah, he's missing.
You know, like Michael, there's a lot of Michaels.
It's a company.
Do your evaluation.
Yeah, when I
Who else?
received
Who
that,
is Ryan?
my original response was like, huh.
Yeah, I need to go. I have so much stuff to do. Oh, yeah.
The question.
Oh, but our plan to do, are you free?
I'm sorry.
Did you get us I'm on the 8-point quiz. That part.
Well, there's 2.
Yeah. So you want, it's when you start with it.
Yes, there's 2.
Where are you right now?
Done with the evaluation process?
Where are you at? No, I know you're almost done. I said
On the second for the print? I mean, like, there is a second.
Oh, we have to screenshot it?
Do you have any issues too? I don't know.
Yeah.
Whoever's further, we'll see.
Everybody sends a screenshot.
First person, not
Just in
complicated.
case.
Second person. Right. But you have
Yes, it's a different thing, right? Oh, yeah, you know. Você sabe o que é isso? Não vai em quest, né? No caso, você se só pegar, viu? What other one? Oh, no, no, no. But get my 2 points.
send a screenshot? You send a screenshot?
Huh?
Send a screenshot.
Oh, you do? Why?
To know that you live.
Who?
But you see going back to it. Go back to it.
Oh, we have to send them a screenshot of that? Oh, yeah, I didn't do that. They do know, they send them an
Make your
email.
call now.
They send them an email.
Yeah. No, he knows everyone who does this. He log in. I don't have to.
I know what I did. That's the concern.
That's no
He
matter,
called me back.
but he doesn't get fully responsible.
Yeah.
Doesn't
He
matter.
knows. Hold on.
This is what it's.
So, and I just yeah,
He said that he said that we don't have to send him a screenshot of the email because he gets a total, like a grand total. They submit that to him.
oh yeah, me too.
You don't wanna be counted as one of the ones that didn't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yesterday was the same thing.
All right, we done now? Yes? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get this test started. All right. You're taking it, I guess? Taking it. Okay, anybody else taking it? Okay. What?
Yes.
Oh, if you need to. What's going on?
Yes. You guys make me feel bad. You're like signing up with the
Yes,
Thank you, like on the borderline from
What?
Yeah.
All those? Okay. 1, 2.
Go on.
2 of them.
Okay.
To get a 96?
I think, well,
Okay, everybody that's not taking it, go somewhere else. Okay, we'll make sure you get your name put on this. Okay, obviously this test is closed book, closed notes, closed computer.